The government this morning has unveiled a new electric vehicle strategy.
And if elected, Labor is today pledging to allocate $200 million to help fix Australia's urban waterways and catchments. The federal opposition leader Anthony Albanese joins us now from Sydney. Good morning. Welcome to News Breakfast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Do you think we all became a little more attached to our rivers and creeks and outdoor areas during COVID?
Oh, we certainly have. One of the things that happened was that people gathered in parks, and it was the only way people were allowed to, in some areas, gather with their friends and family. These parks behind me here in Marrickville were pretty full. People socially distancing, but people enjoying each other's company. And our urban waterways are so important for the quality of our life. More and more people who live in cities live in higher density or medium density housing. They need parks like this around our waterways, right around our cities, to engage in that recreational activity, as well as, of course, we need to address the dreadful rates of problems with our flora and fauna. So many of our species are threatened, and they're threatened around our urban cities.
Can we talk about quality of life? And that goes to the use of electric cars. The federal government's announcing that it plans to install 50,000 charging stations to try and get an extra 1.7 million electric cars onto the roads. Is that going to be enough?
Well, another day, another pamphlet from this government. A government that during the last election campaign was saying that electric vehicles would end the weekend. A government that had a violent opposition to the use of electric vehicles. And now we'd have it believed that they've converted the same government whose fuel security strategy consisted of having fuel storage in the Gulf of Mexico, the same government that's been in denial. And what's occurred here, just a couple of weeks after they released their climate pamphlet, is that they're once again not showing the leadership that's required. Once again, Scott Morrison is following. The truth is that all of the auto manufacturers are phasing out internal combustion engines. There is this massive shift around the world to electric vehicles. Australia's uptake last year was under 2%. In Norway, it was 70%. In the United Kingdom, it was 15% and rising. We're falling way behind, and this is once again a government that was in denial about change rather than shaping change in the interests of people.
So can Australians make the transition to electric cars without subsidies and tax incentives?
Well, what we would do is to eliminate the taxes, both in terms of the excise, but also fringe benefits tax, to make sure that companies could take up electric vehicles. That's the way a whole lot of new cars enter the system, is through the take-up by corporates, by local government, state government, federal government, and then you have the on-sale of those cars. This government is doing nothing about reducing the cost of electric vehicles, and that is a policy that we announced a year ago.
Anthony Albanese, on climate, you said that once Glasgow was done, and granted there's a few days left of the conference, that you would announce, or after Glasgow, we'd hear from Labor about the 2030 targets. This morning in the paper, members of your own party are pushing you to be more ambitious when it comes to 2030. We're almost heading into Christmas. The election campaign feels like it's underway already. When are you going to reveal Labor's policy?
Well, hold the front page. Scott Morrison visits electorate and talks to voter. It's quite extraordinary, some of the coverage that's going on there. Look, Glasgow's still going, and we still haven't seen the government's modelling. They're out there releasing another pamphlet today, but they still haven't released the modelling.
So you're waiting for the government's modelling before you reveal your policy?
Well, it's pretty reasonable that we see what the modelling is that the government's made about its plan. It's also reasonable that we wait to find out what Glasgow has. They've just begun week 2 of the Glasgow conference. One of the things that occurred at Glasgow with regard to 2030 was that Australia was one of the few countries, along with Saudi Arabia, Mexico and Brazil, that didn't increase its 2030 target. And perhaps coming out of that conference, the UN certainly is considering a decision saying that those countries that haven't upgraded their 2030 target need to do so in 2022.
So will we have the policy by the end of the year?
We'll have the policy when we release it. And we waited. This is a government that's been there for 9 years and still hasn't released its modelling. And it's just extraordinary that they've held back. Our policy on climate change will always be better than that of the government. We take climate change seriously. We said that we wouldn't have gone to a conference without increasing our commitment for 2030, which is what just about every other country in the world did. Australia, once again, Scott Morrison giving an empty speech to an empty room. And when it comes to climate, he said, I don't hold a hose, mate. Once again, Scott Morrison was saying he doesn't hold a hose when it comes to climate strategy. And on electric vehicles again today, there's nothing there to decrease the cost of electric vehicles. There's nothing there to really increase the uptake substantially. This is once again a pamphlet in search of a policy.
Anthony Albanese, just briefly, the IBAC hearing in Victoria is hearing that Dan Andrews was aware of branch stacking and turned a blind eye to it. It's directly involving your colleague, the Deputy Leader, Richard Marles, being a beneficiary of branch stacking. Are you comfortable with what you're hearing out of the IBAC?
Newsflash, Lisa. The big federal story out of issues in Victoria is that of Michael Sukkar, who remains a minister in the Morrison government.
And we have been putting those questions to the Morrison government members. I'm asking you about your party and Richard Marles.
And not getting an answer. Well, you're asking me about a state issue. Richard Marles has nothing to answer for. There's no suggestion that he's done anything wrong. There is major suggestion that Michael Sukkar has done a lot wrong. He's a minister of the Crown in the federal government, and Scott Morrison is saying nothing to see here, even though it involves Kevin Andrews, his colleague, who's lost pre-selection for the seat. This is a scandal in which the federal government is saying nothing to see here, and it's a reminder that we need a strong national anti-corruption commission where people in the Labor Party have done the wrong thing. They should bear the consequences of that. You have state anti-corruption commissions in New South Wales having hearings about Gladys Berejiklian and her government and what went on there. You have these hearings in Victoria. Nationally, we have an approach of nothing to see here, in spite of the fact you have Michael Sukkar's activities, you have sports rorts, you have commuter car park rorts, you have a massive abuse of taxpayer funds by a federal government that's addicted to using taxpayer funds as if they're funds of the Liberal and National Party.
And we'll continue taking that up with the Morrison government. Mr Albanese, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your time. We will continue to take that up with the Morrison government.
Good. I hope you get an answer because at the moment you've just got stonewalling, and Michael Sukkar, this scandal has been around now for a long period of time with no penalty whatsoever against someone who continues to sit in the Morrison ministry.
Thanks, Anthony Albanese.
Thank you.